Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the single most important, yet most misunderstood, specification of any display: the refresh rate. This isn't just a number on a box, it's the invisible force that dictates the fluidity of your digital life. And by the end of this journey, you won't just see your screen differently, you'll understand the profound impact it has on everything you do. Let's start with the bedrock, the foundation upon which our entire digital visual world was built: 60 Hz. When we say 60 Hz, we mean the screen is redrawing the entire image from top to bottom, 60 times every single second. Think of it like a flipbook. If you have a 60-page flipbook for a 1-second animation, the motion will be coherent, but it won't be seamless. There's a calculable, physical limit to this dance of light. Each of those 60 frames gets its moment in the spotlight, staying visible on screen for precisely 16.67 milliseconds. In the grand scheme of things, 16.67 milliseconds is an incredibly short amount of time, faster than a blink of an eye. For watching a movie or typing up an email, it's perfectly adequate. The illusion of motion is maintained, but our eyes and our brains are far more sophisticated than we give them credit for. The real villain here isn't the speed of the refresh. It's the duration that each frame is held static before the next one appears. This is a phenomenon known as sample and hold, and it is the primary cause of motion blur on modern displays. Imagine a bright red ball moving across your screen. At 60 Hz, the screen shows the ball in position A for 16.67 minutes. Then, it instantly redraws it at position B, holding it there for another 16.67 minutes. Your brain, trying to process this sequence, doesn't perceive a smooth, continuous motion. Instead, your eye's tracking motion is continuous, while the image's motion is discrete, and your brain attempts to bridge the gap by smearing the two static images together, creating a blurry trail behind the ball. This is why quickly scrolling through a wall of text on a 60 Hz monitor can turn it into an unreadable mess. And why a fast-paced action scene in a game can feel sluggish and indistinct. So why did 60 Hz become the standard? It is a legacy tied to the history of television broadcasting and the electrical grids in North America, which operate at 60 Hz. It was an elegant engineering solution that made early televisions simpler and cheaper to produce. Its key advantage, which keeps it relevant today, is its efficiency. Drawing the screen only 60 times per second requires less processing power and consumes less energy. For a laptop where every minute of battery life is precious, or for a standard office monitor used for static spreadsheets and documents, 60 Hz is not just acceptable, it's the smart, efficient choice. It is the reliable, no-frills workhorse of the display world, built for productivity, not for performance. If 60 Hz is the established standard, 75 Hz is the first tentative step into a smoother world. On paper, the jump from 60 to 75 refreshes per second seems minor, almost trivial, but it's in the milliseconds that the magic happens. By increasing the refresh rate to 75 Hz, the frame hold time drops from 16.67 millimeters down to 13.33 millimeters. That's a reduction of over 3 milliseconds per frame. While you might not be able to consciously perceive a 3-mass difference, your brain certainly can. The result is a subtle but immediately noticeable improvement in clarity and responsiveness. The motion blur we discussed is lessened. When you scroll through a web page, the text remains slightly more legible. When you drag a window across your desktop, it feels less like it wading through digital molasses, and more like it gliding on a surface of glass. That annoying, ghosting noisor trail behind your mouse cursor becomes fainter and shorter. This isn't a game-changing leap, but rather a significant quality-of-life upgrade. Think of it as switching from regular unleaded gasoline to a premium blend. Your car is still the same, but it just runs a little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother. Input lag, the delay between you moving your mouse and seeing the cursor move on screen, also sees a small but tangible reduction. These tiny improvements accumulate over a full day of work, reducing eye strain and making your interactions with the computer feel less like a chore and more like a conversation. You'll often find 75 Hz refresh rates on budget-friendly gaming monitors, or as a slightly premium feature on modern office displays. It's the manufacturer's way of offering a cheap, effective upgrade without having to significantly re-engineer the panel or drive up the cost. It represents the point of diminishing returns in reverse, a small investment for a surprisingly pleasant improvement in the user experience. It doesn't come with the significant power or cost trade-offs of higher refresh rates, making it an intelligent, understated enhancement for everyday computing. This is where the revolution truly begins. Crossing the 100 Hz threshold is like seeing color television for the first time after a lifetime of black and white. At 100 Hz, the frame time drops to 10 ms. At 120 Hz, it plummets to just 8.3 ms. At this level, you have effectively cut the motion blur of a standard 60 Hz screen in half. The difference is not subtle. It is a fundamental transformation in how motion is rendered. The world on your screen gains a sense of solidity and permanence. Objects in motion no longer feel like fleeting ghosts. They feel present and clear. For productivity, this means scrolling through long documents or websites becomes a genuinely pleasant experience, with text remaining crisp and readable. For gaming, it's the point where the barrier between your actions and the game's response begins to dissolve. However, the raw speed of 120 Hz is only half of the story. This is the territory where a critical technology comes into its own: adaptive sync. You know it by its brand names: NVIDIA's G-Sync and AMD's FreeSync. To understand why this is so important, you first have to understand the problem it solves: screen tearing. Imagine your graphics card. GPU is the artist, and your monitor is the canvas. On a traditional, fixed refresh rate monitor, the canvas demands a new painting exactly every 8.3 milliseconds at 120 Hz. But your artist, the GPU, doesn't work at a fixed speed. In a complex game scene, it might take 10 millimeters to render a frame. In a simple scene, it might only take 5 mm. When the canvas demands a new picture before the artist is finished with the old one, the canvas gets impatient and just grabs whatever is available. The result is a horrifying visual artifact called screen tearing, where the top half of the screen displays the previous frame, and the bottom half displays the new one, creating a visible horizontal tear across the image. Adaptive sync changes the entire relationship. It turns the monitor into a patient partner. The monitor now tells the GPU, "Forget my schedule. Just let me know when you've finished a new frame, and I'll display it immediately." This dynamic synchronization between the GPU's output and the monitor's refresh timing completely eliminates screen tearing and the associated stuttering. It creates a seamless, buttery smooth flow of motion, even when your frame rate fluctuates. The 120 Hz mark is also a specie, sweet spot, for another reason. It aligns beautifully with other forms of media. Most films are shot at 24 frames per second. 120 is a perfect multiple of 24. We do 24, Ashka 5, 120, meaning a 120 Hz display can show each film frame 5 times in a row for perfectly even, judder-free playback. Similarly, the latest generation of gaming consoles, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, target 120 FPS as their performance benchmark. A 120 Hz monitor is, therefore, the perfect all-rounder, a practical, powerful, and efficient baseline for the modern era of both gaming and productivity. If 120 Hz was the gateway, 144 Hz was the destination. For years, this number has been the universal benchmark for PC gaming, the established rite of passage for anyone taking their hobby seriously. At 144 refreshes per second, each frame is held for a mere 6.9 milliseconds. The result is exceptionally sharp motion and a feeling of near instantaneous response. This wasn't just an incremental step. It represented a cultural shift. It was the point where monitor technology began to be designed, marketed, and sold specifically with the needs of gamers in mind. The experience of playing on a 144 Hz monitor for the first time is revelatory. The connection you feel to your character becomes almost telepathic. When you whip your mouse around in a fast-paced shooter, the world on screen pivots with a one-to-one fidelity that 60 Hz simply cannot replicate. Aiming feels tight, precise, and reactive. Even just moving your cursor around the desktop has a liquid-like fluidity that makes the entire operating system feel more responsive. A key reason 144 Hz became the standard was its accessibility. It hit the perfect equilibrium of speed, manufacturing cost, and GPU horsepower. By the time 144 Hz monitors became mainstream, mid-range graphics cards from NVIDIA and AMD were powerful enough to consistently push 144 frames per second in popular esports titles at 1080p resolution. This democratic combination of hardware made high refresh rate gaming attainable for the masses, not just the wealthy enthusiasts. When paired with adaptive sync, a 144 Hz monitor delivers what many still consider to be the ideal gaming experience. Gameplay is rendered with incredible smoothness and clarity, with virtually zero screen tearing or distracting stutters. This level of performance provides a tangible competitive advantage. In a game like Counter-Strike or Valorant, seeing an opponent emerge from behind a corner just a few milliseconds earlier, because your screen updated faster, can be the deciding factor between victory and defeat. This is the peaker's advantage, and at 144 Hz, it becomes a powerful tool in a player's arsenal. As the market for 144 Hz monitors became saturated, manufacturers needed a new number to put on the box to stand out. Enter 165 Hz. In truth, a 165 Hz monitor is almost always a 144 Hz panel that has been factory overclocked, meaning its internal electronics are being pushed to run slightly faster than their official specification. Let's be clear, the experiential difference between 144 Hz and 165 Hz is almost imperceptible to the vast majority of people. We're talking about a reduction in frame time from 6.9 ms to just 6 ms. The drop in input lag is about a single millisecond. It's less of a revolutionary leap and more of a marketing bump, a way to gain a psychological edge on the store shelf. So, is it completely useless? Not quite. The true, albeit subtle advantage of 165 Hz lies in providing extra headroom for adaptive sync to work its magic. Frame rates in games are never perfectly stable. They fluctuate constantly depending on the on-screen action. If your game is hovering between 140 and 160 FPS, a 165 Hz monitor provides a slightly larger buffer zone. This can help to smooth out those minor frame dips and maintain a more consistent feeling of fluidity, as the frame rate is operating further away from the monitor's maximum refresh ceiling. You'll often see this refresh rate on premium ultra-wide and curved gaming monitors. It's a small incremental refinement, a slightly caffeinated version of 144 Hz. It's a nice feature to have, but it's certainly not a revolutionary one. Think of it as the speedometer on a sports car that goes to 200 mph when the car OOS top speed is 195. That extra bit on the dial doesn't make the car faster, but it reinforces the idea that you're driving a high-performance machine. Welcome to the big leagues. When you cross the 200 Hz barrier and enter the realm of 240 Hz, you are leaving the world of perceptible smoothness and entering the domain of pure competitive optimization. Here, each frame flashes before your eyes for a mere 4.16 milliseconds. At this speed, traditional motion blur practically ceases to exist. Objects in motion are rendered with an almost surreal clarity, appearing as a series of distinct, sharp images rather than a continuous, blurred streak. For the average user or casual gamer, this is deep into the territory of diminishing returns. The visual difference between 144 Hz and 240 Hz is far less dramatic than the jump from 68 Hz to 120 Hz. So why does it exist? The answer has little to do with making the game look prettier and everything to do with minimizing the delay between the player and the game. It's all about latency. Using a 240 Hz monitor feels like your brain is hardwired directly into the computer. The sense of immediacy is profound. Input latency plummets, and the world on screen reacts to your commands with an instantaneousness that has to be felt to be believed. To return to our conversation analogy, if 60 Hz is a walkie-talkie with a noticeable push-to-talk delay, 240 Hz is a direct face-to-face conversation where the feedback is instant and seamless. This tier of performance is purpose-built for one group of people: esports professionals. In a high-stakes tournament where millions of dollars are on the line, A single millisecond can be the difference between a championship-winning headshot and a second-place finish. Tracking a fast-moving enemy in a game like Overwatch or Apex Legends becomes less about predicting their movement and more about reacting to their precise, real-time position. However, this level of performance comes with a demanding price. To truly benefit from a 240Hz monitor, your computer system must be a beast, capable of consistently generating 240 frames per second. This often requires a top-of-the-line CPU and GPU, and it's why these monitors are most commonly found in 1080p or 1440p resolutions. Pushing 240 frames at 4K is a feat that even the most powerful hardware struggles with. For the professional, it's a non-negotiable tool of the trade. For everyone else, it's exhilarating, but frankly, overkill. Now, we arrive at the absolute pinnacle of display technology, a place where engineering prowess pushes up against the very limits of human biology. At 360 Hz, frames are delivered every 2.7 milliseconds. At a staggering 480 Hz, that window shrinks to just 2.88 milliseconds. We are now talking about speeds that are, for all intents and purposes, beyond what most human eyes can meaningfully distinguish in terms of smoothness. The visual difference between 240 Hz and 360 Hz is incredibly subtle, and the jump to 480 Hz is even more so. The primary goal here is no longer visual fidelity, but the absolute annihilation of system latency. These displays are designed with a singular purpose: to minimize the time it takes for a player's action to be reflected on screen, shaving off every last possible microsecond of delay, to give professional esports athletes the fastest possible connection to the game world. Think of these monitors not as consumer electronics, but as pieces of scientific equipment designed for optimizing human performance. It's analogous to a Formula One car. A commercial Ferrari is an incredible piece of engineering, but an F1 car is a stripped-down, purpose-built machine where every single component is designed to shave milliseconds off a lap time, often at the expense of comfort, practicality, and cost. The technical challenges to achieving these speeds are immense. The sheer bandwidth required to send this much data restricts these monitors almost exclusively to a 1080p resolution. They consume significant power and require the absolute best gaming hardware to be of any use. For the elite few whose careers depend on reaction time, the subtle but real advantage in motion continuity and reduced latency can provide a critical edge. For the rest of us, they are engineering marvels to be admired from afar, a glimpse into the future of display technology rather than a practical upgrade for today. We've talked about refresh rate as the raw speed limit of your display, but raw speed is useless without control. This is where adaptive sync, or variable refresh rate, VRR, comes in to play the role of the great peacemaker. As we touched on earlier, this technology, known as G-Sync, FreeSync, or HDMI VRR, is arguably more important to the experience of smooth motion than the raw refresh rate number itself. Let's revisit the analogy of the artist, your GPU, and the canvas, your monitor. Without adaptive sync, the canvas is a demanding, impatient boss, forcing the artist to work on a rigid, unforgiving schedule. The result is either the ugly visual of screen tearing or the frustrating judder of V-Sync, which forces the GPU to wait for the monitor, causing input lag. It's a messy, inefficient system. Adaptive sync fundamentally changes this dynamic. It creates a perfect harmony, a symbiotic relationship between the two components. The monitor essentially says to the GPU, "Take your time. I'll wait. Just let me know the moment you have a new frame ready, and I will display it instantly." This eliminates both tearing and stutter, creating an unbroken, fluid stream of motion. A crucial concept here is the VRR window, which is the range of frame rates in which the technology works, e.g., 48-144 Hz. As long as your game's frame rate stays within this window, your experience will be incredibly smooth. Many modern monitors also feature low frame rate compensation, LFC. If your FPS drops below the minimum of the VRR window, say to 30 FPS, LFC will intelligently display each frame multiple times, e.g., 4 times on a 120 Hz display, to bring it back into the VRR window and maintain a smooth, tear-free experience. This leads us to a bold but critical statement. A well-tuned 120Hz monitor with high-quality adaptive sync will almost always provide a smoother, more enjoyable experience than a static 165Hz monitor without it. Sync quality often matters more than raw speed. It's the difference between a powerful engine that's constantly sputtering and stalling, and a slightly less powerful but perfectly tuned engine that delivers its power smoothly and reliably. Up until now, we've focused on refresh rate, but that's only one half of the equation for motion clarity. The other, equally important half, is response time. This is where we need to unravel the mystery of the ghost in the machine and understand two crucial acronyms, GTG and MPRT. Let's refine our artist analogy. Refresh rate is how many new paintings the canvas can display per second. GTG, gray-to-gray response time, is how fast the artist, the individual liquid crystals in a pixel, can erase the old color and paint the new one. This is typically measured in milliseconds. If the pixels are slow to change, say a 10 ms GTG time, you'll see a faint remnant of the previous frame's image lingering behind a moving object. This creates a noticeable smearing or ghosting effect, which is especially common on older or cheaper LCD panels. A fast GTG time, 1 TBC 4 ms, is essential for a high refresh rate monitor to look sharp. But even with an instantaneous GTG time, you can still have motion blur. Why? Because of the sample and hold issue we discussed with 60 Hz. This is where MPRT, moving picture response time, comes in. MPRT doesn't measure how fast a pixel can change color. It measures how long a single, completed frame remains visible on screen. The longer a static image of a moving object is held in front of your eyes, the more your brain will perceive it as a blur. This is where advanced technologies like backlight strobing, often called ULMB, DIAC, or ELMB, come into play. Instead of leaving the backlight on continuously, this technique strobes it on and off in perfect sync with the refresh rate. The screen shows a frame, and then briefly goes black before showing the next one. Think of a strobe light in a dark club. It makes a dancer's motion appear as a series of super sharp, distinct snapshots. This technique dramatically reduces the perceived MPRT, making motion look incredibly clean and clear, even at a lower refresh rate. The downside is that it can reduce brightness and cause flickering for some users. This is also why OLED displays are the undisputed kings of motion clarity. Unlike LCDs, which use a constant backlight, each individual pixel in an OLED panel is its own light source. They can turn on and off almost instantly, resulting in a near-zero MPRT. This gives OLEDs a level of motion clarity that even the fastest LCDs struggle to match. The key takeaway is this: refresh rate sets the potential for clarity, but response time, both GTG and MPRT, determines if that potential is actually achieved. You can have the most powerful graphics card in the world and the fastest, most technologically advanced monitor ever made, but if you connect them with a cheap, outdated, or low-quality cable, you might as well have thrown your money away. The cable is the unsung hero of your setup, the digital highway that carries an immense amount of visual data every second. And if that highway is too narrow, it will create a performance bottleneck that silently sabotages your entire system. The amount of data required, or bandwidth, multiplies exponentially with higher resolutions and refresh rates. Throw in extra data for things like HDR, high dynamic range color, and the numbers become astronomical. For example, a 4K 3840 2160 signal at 240 Hz with 10-bit color requires nearly 80 gigabits per second, GBps of data. This is where modern display standards, like DisplayPort 1.4, 2.1, and HDMI 2.1, become absolutely essential. Even these powerful standards often have to rely on a clever technology called display stream compression, DSC. DSC is a visually lossless compression algorithm, a smart way of zipping the video signal in real time to fit more data down the same pipe without any perceptible loss in image quality. The practical lesson here is critical. Your cable matters. If you buy a high-performance monitor, you must use the high-quality cable that came in the box, or purchase one that is certified for the specific standard you need. Using an old HDMI 1.4 cable on an HDMI 2.1 monitor will force it into a lower refresh rate or disable features like HDR. If you ever plug in a new monitor and find that it's flickering, displaying strange artifacts, or simply won't let you select its maximum advertised refresh rate, the very first thing you should suspect and replace is the cable. Don't let a $10 accessory cripple your $1,000 investment. As we've journeyed from the humble simplicity of 60 Hz to the mind-bending excess of 480 Hz, one thing has become clear. Refresh rate isn't just a number, it's a measure of experience. It's the difference between a sluggish, blurry digital world and one that feels crisp, immediate, and responsive. It's a complex dance between the refresh rate itself, the pixel response time that keeps it clean, the adaptive sync technology that keeps it smooth, and even the physical cable that delivers the signal. The lesson to take away from all of this is that the smartest upgrade isn't always the one with the biggest number on the box. The best monitor is the one that is best for you. It's the one that fits how you actually use your screen, the capabilities of your computer, and the priorities of your own eyes. A competitive esports player who buys a 60 Hz monitor is kneecapping their own performance. But equally, an office worker who buys a 360 Hz monitor is paying a premium for performance they will never see or feel. Or, the true sweet spot is found in balance. A refresh rate your GPU can consistently match, paired with quality adaptive sync and fast pixel response. So, I want to leave you with a few questions to think about. What refresh rate are you using right now? And after hearing all this, do you feel like it's the right fit for you? What was the biggest aha moment or the most surprising thing you learned today? Let me know your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive. And of course, if you found this breakdown helpful and you want to unravel more of the technology that shapes our digital world, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. It means the world to me. Thanks for watching.